Hi, this is Morley and this is the M-Wire. Well, folks, the things between Ukraine and Russia are certainly exacerbating by the day here. There's a lot more provocative measures being taken by potentially both sides, but most recently a Ukrainian soldier was killed in a shelling attack yesterday. Now, I realize that there's been quite a few skirmishes, just small battles, if you will, between Russia and the Ukraine, and this isn't exactly a full-blown war yet. But I'm going to get into some things that indicate that war could very well be on the horizon here, as Vladimir Putin is nothing less than defiant as to what the EU, the United States, or even NATO wants him to do. He's absolutely not even so much as blinking as far as what the West is saying that he has to do, like about in regards to his veiled threats of threatening to cut off gas to the EU and whatnot. He's not backing down, folks. He is completely defiant. He knows that his country's military is no joke and they're very well armed with state-of-the-art weapons, and he feels that he can have quite a bit of swagger, if you will. This Ukrainian soldier that was killed is basically Vladimir Putin saying, what do you think you can do about it? Because he knows that Ukraine's army is no match for Russia's. He could roll over the border and take it over probably in a matter of days to a week if he really wanted to, if there was no other country's involvement. And he's betting, I know for a fact that he's betting, that the United States in particular, with its current very weak leadership, will do absolutely nothing if he does that. To further bolster what I've just said, take a look at this here. These are pictures of the United States essentially donating munitions to Ukraine, so Ukraine is more in a position to defend itself. I'm not sure what type of munitions these are, probably just, regular rounds for rifles, maybe even, mortars, just things of that nature. But I think that's as far as the United States is prepared to go as far as getting involved in Ukraine, because, as I say, we have very weak leadership in our country. I don't think our leader will do anything beyond things like this to get involved in this. He'll essentially just pawn it off on the EU and NATO, as that is more geographically close to Russia than the United States is. Now, I'm going to get into this article from the Washington Post that discusses this, and you'll see from this article how defiant Putin is and how really weak the United States is, quite frankly, in how they're dealing with this situation thus far. Without further ado, let's get right into this. The guns of November are locked and loaded as Russia continues to defy U.S. and European pressure to withdraw its troops from the volatile Ukrainian border. The tense Ukrainian standoff is a case in diplomatic signaling that thus far hasn't worked. For weeks, senior U.S. and European officials have warned Russian President Vladimir Putin to pull back what looks ominously like an invasion force or face harsh consequences from a U.S.-less coalition. The warning message hasn't connected. Instead, Putin seems to be relishing the West's anxiety. He claims Thursday that the United States and its allies were ignoring Russia's red lines and escalating the situation with shows of force. He said he hoped the recent tension in the Western statements about Ukraine would remain as long as possible, so that Russia's views would be taken seriously. Putin's goal seems to be restoration of Moscow's Soviet-era hegemony over Kiev. You see, folks, Putin is just basically laughing at the West. He's essentially saying, I'll do what I please, thank you. Mind your own business. He is not taking anything that the United States says seriously. The fact that the United States is sending munitions to Ukraine is quite telling in itself, that they're basically getting Ukraine prepared as they can to defend itself. Nearly 100,000 Russian troops have massed along the border, according to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. This face-off continued Thursday. U.S. officials didn't detect any change in the Russian military presence up or down. There are nearly daily skirmishes on the contested Donbass region of the eastern Ukraine between Russian-backed separatists and Ukrainian troops. The conflict could escalate if Russia sends humanitarian aid convoys into the region under a decree issued Monday by Putin. Ukraine has recently augmented its defense of the Donbass, using Turkish drones to combat pro-Russian rebels and drawing a protest from Moscow. So that Ukrainian soldier that was killed yesterday is essentially a casualty of this conflict in the Donbass area. The Biden administration appears caught between its desire to deter a Russian invasion and its hope for new talks with Putin about strategic stability and other topics. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan spoke by phone with his Russian counterpart Wednesday. The White House didn't provide details, but a Russian spokesman said the topics included possible top-level contact soon between Putin and President Biden. I mean, talk about a lack of meeting of the minds. Can you imagine Vladimir Putin and Biden sitting down? Biden can't even put a coherent sentence together. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin is a very well-rounded individual. And in case you didn't know, folks, he doesn't do it that often, but Vladimir Putin actually speaks English. Most people don't know that. I just thought I'd throw that in there. But this would be an absolute laughable meeting. Just imagine the two of them sitting down having a conversation. Laughable, I tell you. Washington's most empathetic warning about the Russian buildup was a November 10th statement by Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He cited reports of unusual Russian military activity near Ukraine and warned against any escalatory or aggressive actions by Russia, with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba by his side. Blinken said America's commitment to Ukraine's territorial integrity was ironclad, but he avoided specifics about what the United States would do in the event of an invasion. Now, obviously, you don't tip your hand to your enemy, but I think in this administration's case, that's code for we will do absolutely and positively nothing about this. Just my opinion. CIA Director William J. Burns had paid a quiet visit to Moscow earlier this month. He told Russian officials about U.S. concern over the Russian troop buildup and warned that an invasion of Ukraine would be a severe economic reprisals. Administration officials were disappointed that Burns' cautionary message didn't seem to register with the Kremlin. You see, that's all the U.S. is prepared to do. Oh, we'll sanction you. Meanwhile, Russia could be firing, guns and bombs and doing bombing raids. And the worst that the U.S. is going to do, well, we're going to curtail you economically. That's how they do things. Very soft. To check Russia, the administration has tried to mobilize European allies who are nearer to the firing line in Ukraine. French President Emmanuel Macron and German Chancellor Angela Merkel have both spoken directly with Putin over the past 2 weeks. Britain's Defense Secretary met his Ukrainian counterpart in Kiev, and Sweden's Defense Minister said he was ready to send Swedish troops to Ukraine to help train that country's military. So the United States that just proves it, that the United States basically wants the EU to handle it, more or less. They just, they'll give supplies and stuff, they'll sanction, but that's as far as they're willing to go. As far as actually getting involved in this, I don't think so. The Biden administration has been making contingency plans with allies in case Russia moves across the border. U.S. officials won't discuss how they would respond, although they caution that because Ukraine isn't a NATO member, there's no guarantee to protect Kiev. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin expressed the uncertainty shared by U.S. allies when he admitted Wednesday We're not exactly sure what Mr. Putin is up to. Does that instill confidence in you folks that the United States would do anything if Putin started rolling tanks over the border? Because he's not a NATO member. Oh, if you're not in NATO, sorry, not interested, kind of thing. That's essentially the demeanor. They have that disclaimer in there. Well, we might get involved, but we might not. Now that's another thing. Vladimir Putin does not want the Ukraine to join NATO. If he is going to invade, I absolutely guarantee you he will do it before the Ukraine can become a member of NATO, for this very reason right here, that countries would be apprehensive to defend it unless they were a fellow member of NATO. Kremlin seems increasingly determined to force Zelensky's aggressive pro-Western government into submission to Moscow. Putin this summer published a lengthy article explaining the historical roots of his view that, he puts it, Russians and Ukrainians represent one people, a single whole. He argued that true sovereignty of Ukraine is possible only in partnership with Russia. That further supports that Vladimir Putin essentially wants an old-school Cold War era Russia united, not split up into different provinces, if you will, as it is now. Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's former president and prime minister, followed Putin's commentary with a blistering article in Kommersant in October titled, "Why is it senseless to deal with the current Ukrainian leadership?" He opened with a chilling bit of Ukrainian folk wisdom. When the goat tangles with the wolf, only the skin will remain of the goat. But Ukraine is a goat with teeth. An investigation released this week by the investigative group Bellingcat described an astonishingly bold sting operation by Zelensky's intelligence operatives last year to capture dozens of Russian mercenaries who had fought in eastern Ukraine. Though it failed, that operation must have been galling for a former intelligence operative like Putin. Not just an intelligence operative, folks. Vladimir Putin is the former head of the KGB, in case you didn't know that. He is well savvy in intelligence, quite obviously, and he's not a stupid man. You can say whatever you want about him personally, about what his stance is on this matter, but don't call him stupid, because that he absolutely is not. The Biden administration is right to seek a more stable and predictable relationship with Russia. But the Ukraine confrontation is just a reminder of how absent both conditions are now. The administration should follow its instinct to revive Minsk Protocol to end the war in eastern Ukraine, even though tens of thousands of Russian and Ukrainian troops are blocking the exit ramp. Overcoming such obstacles is what American diplomacy at its best can accomplish. Well, that's only if Biden, actually does something about this and tries to be diplomatic about this. Or he's just going to, who knows what he's going to do, folks? I mean, we're talking about someone that's half senile here versus somebody that has a very sharp and tactical mind, okay? That's essentially what we're dealing with. If this were a movie, this is Godzilla versus Bambi, okay? To put it in an allegorical sense. But I thought I'd give you this update because, in my opinion, this is a very, very underreported story. I would greatly appreciate it if you would share this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't, like and comment as well. I love to see the comments. And until I give you the next update, God bless.